All right. Sorry. Yeah. So I'll set the context. The context is that Igor and I had a call. Then I think I mentioned something about the Redis setup, and he said that there was no resolution. So we thought they have an issue, and then note this down and discuss like how we want to set up Redis in the context of the zonal psychic. Like, would there be a HA setup? How are we going to deploy? Based on the original proposal, I believe the one Andrew wrote that is for Epic 423, that's linked in Epic 423. The setup is that each zone would be independent of each other. The rail service in zone, let's say US East 1B, would send the psychic jobs into the Redis that is within that zone, and then there will be a psychic worker cluster deployed within that zone, and it will just all be nicely partitioned within that zone, and then it would scale out. So let me share my screen and I can. It will look something like this. And this was the diagram that was in the proposal. So, and I think Igor is proposing something like this, which is more of a logical partition, so that we can have another P3, P4, P5, P6 without being constrained to zones. I believe if we were to do this and we want to spin up one more, we would need to do it in another region like Central or West. Correct me if I'm wrong, Igor. We are not able to do another one like another US East 1D setup. Would that be correct? Like, let's say we have two US East 1B setups, and then so we have a duplicate of this.
I don't know. I think that's kind of the question. Yeah, maybe someone else can speak to that. I'm looking at Sean.
Sorry, my cat was distracting me. What was the question?
Like whether we are able to do a setup. So let's say this is our setup where my cursor is, and we want to do another step. We want to expand it to 6 clusters, zones instead. Are we able to do 2 US 1B, 2 US 1C, and 2 US 1D? Would that make sense? Like, and they'll all be in the East region without going to Central or West, because I think Igor mentioned that cross-region latency is something we haven't explored.
So yeah, this was a pretty vague comment, so sorry for not being more helpful, but I do remember having a discussion with Craig when we were looking at this before, which was a while ago, that the name Sidekick Zonal Clusters was potentially misleading because there's nothing about it that requires zones, or indeed Kubernetes clusters for that matter. Like, you could logically shard Sidekick on VMs with Redis on VMs and with Rails on VMs, right? Like, you could say, like, here's Redis Sidekick 1, here's Redis Sidekick 2, here's Redis Sidekick 3. We are going to pick some way of telling nodes that this is the Redis Sidekick you use as your primary Sidekick instance. There's no strict coupling to Kubernetes or GCP in that. So I guess that doesn't really help. But like, just to say, like, don't feel constrained by the name necessarily, by the name of the project.
Yeah. Go ahead.
No, I was saying that Igor's suggestion actually is pretty neat. Like, because now we have 3 regions of web services, and if we were to do a zonal setup, it means we have to scale up the web services like accordingly, right? Compared to this setup where we can spin up another. Let's say we have 3 zones of web services, and then we have 3 equivalent shards of Scikit Redis. So like P1, P2, and P3. If we need a P4, we could just spin up a P4, and then the application load balancer within the web services would just find the 4th one. In that sense, is that what you're going for, Igor? Like, you could scale them independently without
yeah.
Like,
so I guess
coupling them. Yeah.
I mean, to me, this diagram pretty much makes explicit what Sean just said, right? Which is that we could make it logical. And so I guess my question is, well, okay, so maybe we should. And we should maybe explicitly include that in how we frame the project and how we design the actual architecture.
Yeah, I think, but I think we kind of need Alejandro here because he's the DRI for this to give his input.
It's a proposal. I'm not.
Yeah,
so I think doing it, decoupling it from the deployment methods has some pretty obvious benefits from like a flexibility point of view. I'm not really sure what the disadvantages of doing it in that proposal are. Is it just that it's more complicated to like you have to do some extra work to decide which one's using which Redis sidekick because it's not just automatically the one in your zone, or is it that or is it something else? Like what's the downside of not caring about this?
I think that's the main difference, yes.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's also something that we can kind of look at the enqueuing and dequeuing separately. And that was sort of the other thing that I was trying to do here is make explicit that enqueuing and dequeuing are not the same. So when we enqueue, we have flexibility in where we send a job, right? Whereas when we dequeue, we kind of need to pick. And so we can have separate sidekick consumers per partition. We will need to have separate ones pretty much. So, there is a dedicated Kubernetes deployment for P1, one for P2, and those could be zones, but let's go with this for now. So those are separate. But
so I think
the clients in queuing don't really care, right?
No, so I think Wang Min was looking at this a bit before because can I just share my screen real quick, Sylvester?
Yeah. Let me stop my share. Yeah.
So there is. I'm not recommending we use this directly. There is this sharding support in Sidekick, which is basically like, tell it you want to use this client, tell it you want to use this Redis when you push this, tell it you want to use this Redis when you push this. So it's not necessarily exactly how we want to do it, but we could consider something like that for all clients. So all Sidekick, so just to rewind, just in case anybody's not clear. So all web API and Git nodes that serve HTTP traffic are Sidekick clients. They can push Sidekick jobs. All Sidekick nodes, containers, pods, whatever, are both clients and servers. So they obviously dequeue and process jobs, but they can also push new jobs. Like a job can push other Sidekick jobs. So from the client perspective, like Igor says, there's no need to even stick to one. Like you can just say, I'm just going to round robin these. I'm just going to pick randomly, like whatever approach you take. You could say, I'm just going to stick to one, but it doesn't really matter. It's only from the dequeuing perspective that a Sidekick container needs to know, like, this is my, this is where I'm getting jobs from. And another thing I think about that is that might mean, Sylvester, do you remember which things need to see all shards, all Sidekick, already Sidekicks?
Right now, mainly the API, like metrics. I believe there's one API that deletes jobs. And then I would think the migration helpers would need to see all. like when you do a
Yeah.
queue to queue migration. Yeah. So those are the main ones.
Because I'm just wondering if Sidekick itself needs to know about all shards, or if it's only potentially Rails HTTP traffic that needs to know about all shards. But that's not, it's not super important. If we can configure it for one, we can configure it for both. It's just a thing I'm throwing out there.
But there is a point about the client and server, right? For the servers who pick up a job and needs to queue another job, like for one is the Jira issue importer, like so for those servers, would they and would they or should they? I'm not sure what it would be anyway. Would they need to enqueue to the same shard, or are they free to do a load balance?
I think it doesn't matter.
I don't think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think for one of them,
we don't have ordering guarantees to begin with, right?
Yeah, but for one of the so background post deployment background migration touches Sidekick APIs, like it touches the delete set, the retry set. So for those, I'm not sure it might be good to have an option that lets you stick to one shard. So when it does that cleanup, it stays within that shard.
Yes. So anything that touches,
later.
Yeah, anything that needs to inspect the state of Sidekick. So like retry set, just looking at a queue or looking at one of the retry set scheduled sets, looking at the process list thingy that's there. Anything that does that needs to be aware of all shards, because obviously if you look at the retry set on one, you might not capture everything. What was I going to say there? So Igor's point about ordering guarantees, the only thing we do have is the job deduplication, which I think is already on the shared state Redis, not on the Sidekick Redis, right? So we already moved that.
Moved it.
We were planning for this some time ago. So yeah.
So I guess moving forward for this, like, would the POC be required? Like maybe a branch to see how easy would it be to do a client-side load balancing?
Yeah, I think so, because sorry, I think what we could say is that all client stuff needs to be able to either load balance or fan out, fan in. Like, you know, if it's something that's inspecting the retry set, it needs to check all of them and then compose those results. If it's something that's pushing a job, it just needs to push to one. So maybe that's the distinction, read and write operations. But for the servers, like the job processors, they only need to know about one. Now a Sidekick container has both clients and servers, like you said, so maybe that doesn't simplify it much, but I think that boundary that Igor drew is accurate.
All right. Yeah, then I'll make a note that maybe a POC would be good. Then I'll see. Yeah, I'll just tinker around to see if I can get some like middleware kind of thing in to see if it's easy to do a fan out without having to change much of the code.
Yeah, I have a feeling Wang Min wrote something somewhere, but it might have just been in a comment. It might not have been in a branch. So maybe double check.
I'll check with him.
Yeah.
But yeah, I feel like we've kind of discussed some of these ideas before, but they never really made it into the general narrative around this project. So that's kind of why I'm resurfacing it.
Yeah, sorry, I'm feeling guilty here because, like I said, like there's definitely some stuff that Craig and I discussed, or that Wang Min and I discussed, that I can't find right now. So I don't know if that's just in comments and we didn't update descriptions, or if it was on Slack. I think it was in comments. I just can't find them. But yeah, sorry about that. The other thing is, if we do go that way, it does decouple the, I guess it would be decoupled anyway, but I think it makes really clear the decoupling of the like implementation from the rollout, because, you know, it's clear that all clients should know about all shards anyway. And so, like, you know, for the rollout, that's a bit more of a straightforward thing, I guess, because you just update one place that says these are all the Redis sidekicks, rather than say these sidekicks talk to this Redis sidekick, these sidekicks talk to this Redis sidekick, stuff like that. Maybe that's not actually simpler. I don't know.
Are you getting
Yeah.
at the if we need to sort of have some selection logic in the client as to where we send the traffic, then during the rollout, we can add basically also a decision send to existing implementation versus send to the partitioned one? Or is that?
Yeah, well, I assume that we'd consider the existing one as just like partition 0 at some point.
Not necessarily.
How we do it.
Yeah. Doesn't really matter that much, I think.
Okay.
All right. Yeah, I think then that's it for. I guess that's it for this discussion. This topic at least. Just follow up with a POC to see if it's feasible, and then if it's feasible, then I can ping Alejandro again. Then he can make a call on this, or if there's or whether we need any more validation.
Yeah, I think one of the issues here is that we have picked up and dropped this project a couple of times in the past. So that's probably where some of the, not that I'm taking the blame off myself, because I think I probably should have done a better job of updating stuff, but that probably is part of it. So yeah, if we can keep this moving, that would be good.
Yeah,
I got a thought. Sorry, go ahead.
I think it's definitely adding to the challenge of getting started here and finding out where all the pieces are. Especially as Sean said, like some of it was in conversations, and there's a lot of issues that make up the project. So yeah, I'm glad that this is getting started again, and I think we've got to figure out how we can get it started and keep it moving and get it to a point where it ships this time. There's always been interruptions in the past, and we need to just figure out how to keep those aside this time.
Yeah, I got a random thought because Psychic 7, there's a lot of development of Psychic 7, and Psychic 7 has quite a bit of like it kind of removes a lot of global variables, which is a pain in the butt for us when we are doing Psychic.Redis operations. Like any Psychic APIs would use the global Psychic Psychic Redis object. Then that kind of makes it difficult for us to do things like go across several host address, because to Psychic there's only one host. So like in your experience, how easy is it to upgrade to a major Psychic version? Because if it's easy and there's minimal breaking, then doing that would make lives quite easy in terms of getting application side ready for Zonal.
Is the next version like general availability, or is it still a beta?
So the next major version is Psychic 7, and that's not released. But we are several minor versions behind of Psychic 6 because there are some changes there that are not massive, but beyond the scope of like, I'm just gonna go create an MR to do this in a gap in my day type thing.
I guess that answers the question.
Psychic 7, I think, will be a pretty major upgrade, I would imagine. I think actually Heinrich Liu has been doing most of the Psychic upgrades in the past, so maybe check with him how it's been in the past. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Sounds good. I'll make a.
Is there anything else that anyone would like to go over today?
Oh, sorry. I just had a quick look at the Psychic 7 MR, and we can't upgrade to that because it requires Redis 6.2 and higher, and we still require Redis 5 and higher.
I thought we upgraded to 6.2.
No, we are, but like GitLab the self-managed software only requires Redis 5 and higher.
Yeah, I think I recall seeing like namespaces being removed. Like Redis namespace.
Redis namespaces, yes, but I don't think we use those. Do we?
I think we do. Like we
I'll
have
put a link
GitLab
to the.
rescue. All right.
Oh, right, that. Yes. Put some links in the doc.
So I've added another item to the agenda, if it's okay to move to the next one. Yeah, I posted this a week or two ago, and so FluentD, our log shipper that we use to collect log files from both VMs and Kubernetes nodes and send them into Google Cloud PubSub, which then gets picked up by PubSub Beat and shipped into Elasticsearch. This component is kind of a scalability bottleneck / hazard. And we're sort of getting close to the tipping point, I think. And I'm not sure it's something we have a good handle on at the moment. So FluentD is written in Ruby. This implicitly gives it a single-threaded bottleneck. And we've hit this bottleneck in the past on our HA proxy fleet. That's our HA proxies are, well, they receive a lot of traffic, therefore they produce a lot of logs. And so what usually happens is when we saturate HA proxy, like when we reach the capacity ceiling, usually the first thing to go is actually the logging and not HA proxy itself. HA proxy is pretty close behind, but yeah, the logging is kind of the first one. And we're starting to see this in Kubernetes as well on some of the nodes. I'm not sure if I posted any graphs. No, I don't think I did. Maybe we can take a look at that. So that'll be a logging overview, I suppose. And there's okay, weird. There's, I guess it's probably going to be saturation details and then the Kubernetes CPU, which is a very busy panel, this one. Okay, looks like some metrics were broken. This is a very busy panel because it includes all of the PubSub beats, of which there are many, many, many. And it also includes fluent Ds. So if we
Yeah, didn't Bob have a thing maybe with you about splitting up the logging service?
maybe
Am I
maybe it
misremembering?
wasn't me. Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
Let's see, maybe I can get a better smaller time range just so that we don't have only blank lines. And then I guess let's see what one of those fluent D ones looks like. That's pubs upbeat. Okay, there we go. So container fluent D Elasticsearch, I think, is what we want to filter on. So is it this one? I guess it is. So I guess is that going to be enough? We need to add it down here as well.
Well, if you got the container as part of the sum by, it wouldn't match the labels anyway, I don't think.
Didn't quite get that.
As
Is
in
there
if
something I need
the-
to change or?
No. What I mean is like because container's part of the sum by outside the filter that you added,
I see.
it wouldn't
Yes.
it wouldn't join them. So, but it's fine to add it.
Okay, so did this help? I think this is what we want, right? We only have fluent D Elasticsearch ones now. So yeah, I mean we can see that on the hard to read. Okay, I guess this is this the highest? No, this is also quantile. Can I get rid of the quantiles? I guess it's gonna be getting rid of all of these other things, right?
Yeah.
Should clean it up. Okay, let's see if that makes things better. Okay, so yeah, I mean, in this case, it's going up to like 70% if we look at the last 24 hours. This is what I'm talking about. So that, I mean, to me, that doesn't look too good. So I guess my question is this something we want to do something about?
I mean, I think so. One question I had was, oh, actually, let me click through because you already talked about this somewhere. So vector seemed a popular one. How easy is it going to be to rewrite our Fluent plugins to vector?
I don't know. Sounds like a
Okay.
POC project to me.
Mm-hmm. The other question I had there was, do we actually use any Fluent plugins for the HA proxy? Could we use Fluent for the low, I say lower volume, it's still quite high volume, but the not complete fire hose stuff and switch to vector first of all for HA proxy? Or is that potentially putting us in a risky situation of having both Fluent and vector to maintain?
Yeah, I mean, maybe as like a progressive rollout thing, we could consider doing that. Maybe. I think that's a separate question. Yeah.
And then yeah, I guess I've still got my question on there is like do we want to check the saturation for that? As it happens, as I was talking to you yesterday, there was a bug in the saturation, a misunderstanding in the saturation calculations for Tamland, where they use the average instead of the max of the series. So for cases like this, it probably wouldn't catch that we've actually fully saturated for a while. It will now, except that changing that query effectively invalidated the cache. So we haven't been able to get Tamland to run since, although I have just had a successful run that's populated part of the cache. So I'm on the way now, 3 days later, 4 days later, whatever it is. So I can take a look at that once it's done.
So what you're saying is
we should have some of this.
Do we see this in
planning.
Tamland? And if not, why?
Yeah, exactly. We should have this in
got
there, and I'm hopeful it will be there next week.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Igor, I think what would be helpful on this one is if you can update the description with what we've talked about here about producing a POC, and what it would take, like what steps would be required to produce that POC and what we would ultimately be seeing at the end of that, because then we can figure out when we can schedule to get that done, to have that built. Thank you.
I'll do that. Thanks. All right, that sounds good to me. If there's no other questions, I think we have no other topics, do we? No.
Not unless Amy wants to demo Bluey.
She's finally gone upstairs. Yeah, it's quite a challenge having another person in the room. I've forgotten what it's like to have a coworker in my office. No, thanks for the conversation. Thanks for joining the demo today. Yeah, I'll upload the recording so that others can see it later on. Thanks so much.